February 1969, Bien Hoa Province, South Vietnam. A captured Viet Cong cell leader is being interrogated by a Green Beret intelligence officer in a small wooden hut on the edge of an American firebase. The VC leader has been told he will be executed at sunrise. He has nothing left to lose. The American officer asks him one question: "Why did your unit always retreat when we deployed?" The VC commander looks at him for a long time. The interrogation lasts another 40 minutes. Most of it consists of the American asking variations of the same question, and the VC answering with detailed operational information about cell structures, supply routes, and target selection priorities. But it is the answer to that first question, the one about retreat, that ends up in a Phoenix program file at the Combined Document Exploitation Center in Saigon. The file is then forwarded to MACV Intelligence Headquarters. From there, copies are made for distribution to specific Special Forces units operating in the area. The document is classified secret. It will remain classified for the next 45 years. It was declassified in 2014. You can read it today. This is the story of what captured Viet Cong said about Green Berets, and why what they said helped destroy the entire Viet Cong infrastructure in the southern half of South Vietnam. To understand the context, you have to understand what the Phoenix program actually was. Most people, if they have heard of Phoenix at all, have heard about it through the lens of the anti-war movement. Phoenix was characterized in the 1970s as an assassination program. It was described as a campaign of indiscriminate killing. It was used as evidence of American moral failure in Vietnam. That characterization was incomplete. It was, in some respects, deliberately misleading. The reality of Phoenix was more complex, more interesting, and ultimately more devastating to the Viet Cong than the caricature suggests. Phoenix was an intelligence program. Its formal name was the Phung Hoang Program. It was created in 1967 as a coordinated effort to identify and dismantle the Viet Cong infrastructure, the political and logistical organization that supported Viet Cong military units. Until Phoenix, American military operations in Vietnam had focused on attacking Viet Cong armed units. The result had been frustrating. Viet Cong units could be destroyed in battle, but they would re-emerge weeks later, drawn from the same villages, supplied by the same networks, led by the same political officers. Phoenix was designed to attack the underlying organization rather than the visible armed forces. The theory was that if you could identify the village-level Viet Cong cadres, the political officers who recruited fighters, the logistics officers who arranged supplies, the intelligence officers who tracked American movements, you could collapse the system from within. To do this, Phoenix needed intelligence. Specifically, it needed names. It needed to identify, by name and by position, the specific individuals who made up the Viet Cong infrastructure in each district of South Vietnam. Once those names were identified, Phoenix would attempt to neutralize the individuals through three primary methods. First, capture and interrogation, which was preferred because it produced more intelligence. Second, defection through the Chu Hoi program, which offered amnesty to Viet Cong members who switched sides. Third, killing, which was used when capture was impossible. The neutralization numbers from Phoenix are striking. Between 1,967 and 1,972, Phoenix neutralized approximately 81,740 Viet Cong infrastructure members. Of those, 26,369 were killed, 33,358 were captured, 22,013 defected through Chu Hoi. That is a defection rate of 27%. More than 1 in 4 neutralizations involved a Viet Cong member voluntarily switching sides. This is not the pattern of an indiscriminate assassination program. This is the pattern of a successful intelligence operation that was making the Viet Cong organization untenable for the people who served in it. The men who ran Phoenix at the field level were not regular Army officers. They were Special Forces personnel, specifically Green Berets attached to provincial reconnaissance units. The PRUs were South Vietnamese units, but they were trained, advised, and often commanded in practice by Green Berets. Each PRU had a Green Beret advisor team of 3 to 6 men. The advisors handled intelligence analysis, target development, mission planning, and the actual execution of capture operations. This is where the Viet Cong testimony becomes important. The captured VC who were interrogated by Phoenix teams were not being interrogated by ordinary American soldiers. They were being interrogated by Green Berets who had spent months studying their organization, their patterns, their personality. The Green Berets often knew more about the local Viet Cong network than the Viet Cong members did themselves. A captured VC platoon commander named Nguyen Van Puoc was interrogated in May 1969. The transcript of his interrogation is one of the documents that was declassified in 2014. The interrogating Green Beret, identified in the document only as Captain Smith, asked Nguyen about his cell structure. Nguyen tried to give vague answers. Smith corrected him. Smith named 3 other members of Nguyen's cell. Smith identified Nguyen's superior officer by name. Smith stated the location of the cell's 2 safe houses. Smith identified the village leader who had been providing the cell with food. Nguyen stopped trying to deceive the American. He answered honestly for the next 4 hours. At the end of the interrogation, Smith asked Nguyen one final question. Nguyen was facing imminent execution under standing orders for captured Viet Cong who had refused to defect. Smith asked him, "When you went into the field against my unit, what were your orders?" Nguyen answered without hesitation. He said his orders were to avoid contact whenever possible. He said his superior officer had given him specific instructions to retreat from any engagement with American Special Forces units, even if his unit had numerical superiority. He said the policy had been adopted by Viet Cong Command in the Bien Hoa region in late 1968. He said the policy had been forced on them by losses they could not sustain. When Smith asked why, Nguyen said, "Because you know us. Other Americans, they shoot, they leave. You know us. You come back. You always come back. We cannot fight you because you do not fight like soldiers. You fight like hunters." That answer is what made Phoenix terrifying to the Viet Cong. The Phoenix teams operated on a different timetable than conventional American forces. They did not deploy to a region for a 6-month tour and then leave. They embedded in a region for years. They built relationships with local intelligence sources. They tracked individual VC members across multiple operations. They learned the patterns of life in their district at a level that no other American unit achieved. A Vietnamese general named Tran Van Tra, the same general who wrote about MACV SOG, also wrote about Phoenix in his post-war memoir. He wrote that Phoenix was the most dangerous program of the entire American war. He wrote that conventional American military operations could be absorbed and recovered from. Phoenix could not. He wrote that by 1972, the Viet Cong infrastructure in approximately 1/3 of South Vietnam had been damaged beyond functional repair. Tran's assessment is supported by other Vietnamese sources. Truong Nhu Tang, a former senior NLF official who wrote a memoir after defecting, described Phoenix as the program that broke the back of the Viet Cong political organization. He wrote that by the early 1970s, the NLF was no longer able to recruit sufficient cadres to replace those lost to Phoenix operations. He wrote that the war in the South was effectively lost from the NLF perspective by 1971, even though the conventional military war continued for another 4 years. This is not the standard narrative of the Vietnam War. The standard narrative says that the United States lost in Vietnam. The Phoenix program records and the Viet Cong testimony preserved within them suggests something more complicated. The United States did not win the war, but Phoenix may have won the war within the war for control of the political infrastructure in South Vietnam. So what happened to the men who ran Phoenix? After Vietnam, many of the Green Berets who had served with Phoenix returned to their regular Special Forces units. Some retired, some transferred to the new units being formed in the 1970s. The most experienced Phoenix operators, the ones with the deepest understanding of intelligence-led targeting, were quietly recruited into a new unit being founded in 1977 by a colonel named Charles Beckwith. That unit was Delta Force. The intelligence-led targeting methodology that Delta Force uses today is, in its core principles, the same methodology that Phoenix developed in Vietnam. Identify specific high-value individuals, build comprehensive intelligence files on them, track their patterns of life, plan precise operations to capture or kill them with minimal collateral damage. Repeat. The doctrine is identical, only the technology has changed. If you want to see how that doctrine works in modern Tier 1 operations, our channel War Code covers Delta Force methodology in detail. The link is in the description below. But here is what I want to leave you with. The Viet Cong cell leaders interrogated by Phoenix teams in the late 1960s were not stupid men. Many of them were committed ideologues with years of combat experience. They had survived against enormous odds for years. They had defeated the French. They had defeated the South Vietnamese conventional military. They had matched the United States Army in conventional combat for nearly a decade. But Phoenix broke them, not through firepower, not through technology, through patience, attention, and a kind of operational discipline that the Viet Cong could not match. What happens when an enemy decides to know you better than you know yourself? The Viet Cong learned that answer in the late 1960s. It cost them the war within the war. And the lessons that learning produced continue to shape American special operations today. Tell me what you think in the comments below.